I consider the primary care doctor your head coach. You have to really have the Tom Brady-Belichick relationship. That's not going to happen overnight. And so to me, the most important thing is get recommendations from people in healthcare.
Welcome to Migraine Again, helping you eat, breathe, survive, thrive, and engage better despite migraine. If you or someone you know struggles with migraine often, join us for today's insightful conversation. Now here's your host, founder and managing editor of MigraineAgain.com and co-host of the Migraine World Summit, Paula Dumas.
Ever feel like you have two jobs, one that pays you and another one as a professional patient? Finding the right specialist, reconciling medical bills, researching your treatment options, and coordinating caregivers, it can be time-consuming, tricky, and expensive. That's why we're excited to talk to an industry insider, a doctor and author who will coach us on how to get the most out of an ever-changing healthcare system. For people with chronic conditions like migraine, it's essential. It can make a big difference in the quality of care we get, the quality of life that we enjoy, and our out-of-pocket expenses. We'll get his practical tips to navigate the healthcare system right after this.
A hot new series is out that you're going to want to binge watch with a bag of popcorn in a dark room. A medical drama with intriguing characters waging gritty, complex battles. Critics call it riveting and insightful. A true original you won't find anywhere else. It's the Migraine World Summit. With dozens of new episodes each season, just one click away. Watch world-leading experts from the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, and UCLA from the comfort of your couch. Get an all-access pass to watch it anytime, anywhere, on demand at migraineworldsummit.com. So put on your comfy pajamas and prepare to binge. You'll be glad you did. You're listening to Migraine Again. For show notes and resources from this episode, check out our program page on migraineagain.com. And now, once again, here's your host, Paula Dumas.
An expert in hospital medicine and an internist, Dr. Dennis Deruelle is also the author of Your Healthcare Playbook, Winning the Game of Modern Medicine. It helps patients to understand how insurance, doctors, hospitals, and medical billing actually operate so that you can get the most value from the often imperfect system. Dr. Deruelle, welcome to Migraine Again.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
And we're going to talk today a lot about the U.S. healthcare system, but many of the tips that you're going to share with us, I believe, are relevant to people all around the world who are listening to this program. So, you call our U.S. healthcare system confusing, inefficient, expensive, and sometimes dangerous. Yikes.
That's right. As you know from my book, I use football or sports analogies, and unfortunately, we're fragmented teams of teams, and it's almost, it's very apropos with the Super Bowl just happening. It's almost like you have an NHL team, an NBA team, and an NFL team coming together to try to play. And they don't know what to use, a hockey stick or a football. And that's really our healthcare system. It's fragmented, and patients are stuck in the middle, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So we need to know how to play the game. What really led you to write this book? You know, we're all patients on various states of wellness. You know, who are you trying to help?
Well, the reason I wrote this book is, first of all, for years as a physician, and then becoming an expert on the Affordable Care Act and healthcare reform and healthcare delivery and understanding value, I have helped family members over the years, help them navigate the system and made phone calls for them when they have been diagnosed with something. And then I realized maybe I could do this for a lot of people if I could put it into a book. Mm-hmm. I also did a fellowship in 2010 at UC San Francisco. And during that fellowship, I really understood what was coming at us in terms of the changes with the Affordable Care Act. And I realized that patients would be lost in the Byzantine rules of the ACA. And putting all that together, I realized football was a great way to kind of tell the story. And so that's how the book came about. In terms of people to reach, of course, I think the book is for anyone, even if you're well and healthy, so-called a young invincible. I mean, just look at the flu epidemic this year. you can be very healthy and get the flu and have major issues. So I think that everybody would benefit. However, it's really written more for people that use the healthcare system, of course, more often, because they're the ones that really face this sometimes on a daily basis.
Yeah, and importantly for caregivers as well as patients. So as I was reading the book, I was reading it through two lenses. One is taking care of myself and my own health, but also those in my family, my aging mother. It's all relevant to them too.
I think that's great, and thank you for pointing that out. When I talk about the teams of teams, there is a team around the patient, which could be a family member or a caregiver. There's 50 million caregivers in the United States. So absolutely, I really think this book is for caregivers or daughters or parents. That's extremely important part of this team.
Great. Well, what mistakes do you see that people often make that could be affecting the quality of the healthcare that they're getting?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. If I had to pick one thing, I would say patients are not as proactive as they need to be. They are reticent to speak up at times. They're reticent to ask the question, why? Or, could I have something else? They really, in general, are more passive in their healthcare process. So I think that's probably the biggest mistake. And I would say a second part of that is many patients assume that they're in what I call a safety bubble. A quick anecdote is, there was a truck that was hit by a train in a parade in Midland, Texas. And the truck driver was just following the parade, and he was in what was called later by the safety board, a safety bubble. Mm-hmm. So even though he could hear the train and things, he just assumed that the parade was going on the right way and he should keep going. And so basically patients should never assume they're in a safety bubble in a healthcare situation, because bad things can happen. And so I think that those are two key mistakes.
Yeah, to address the first one first, the idea of being too passive and not as proactive, I think is a significant concern for many people. And not to be sexist, but I think women feel oftentimes even more intimidated than men do. And you walk into a doctor's office and you're a little intimidated by the white coat. You've waited and waited and waited to get this appointment. And then you've got, 7 minutes, maybe 10, 12 if you're lucky, to kind of get it all out there and try to get a good action plan. And that whole pressure cooker is not really conducive, I would say, to help us be proactive and vocal about what we need out of the system.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. That's why I say for some people, it's better to take an advocate or what I call an agent. I use sports analogies. It's like having your agent. Your agent is all they're concerned with is your interest, right? They don't care about the team, the owner, the whatever. And so I think that helps. Another thing is in the book, I tell a story about my sister. I armed her ahead of time with some things to say and some things to have prepared. And when the doctor, the orthopedist, was looking at his watch, she asked him, is there someplace you need to be, or, are you not concerned about my concerns? And then it really turned the conversation. So not everyone can be as assertive as my sister, but in one way or another, if you're prepared and then you take an advocate, you have a little better chance. But I agree, it is intimidating, even for a doctor when you go to a doctor.
I want your sister to go with me to my next doctor's appointment.
Yes.
Stand up for me.
Agree.
Yeah. Everybody needs a sister like that.
Yes.
So you talked about the safety bubble as well as being a mistake that people often make. And, people with migraine are oftentimes find themselves in the emergency room. And, I had one of my biggest life-threatening experiences, not on the freeway, but in the emergency room when I was given too much of a medication that was not good for me and was like literally flatlining. And if my husband hadn't been there, I might not be here today talking to you.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly it. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I'm obviously very, very thankful that that this was remedied for you. But I wrote the book because I know this. I see this. I've seen it over the years. I've been a physician for more than 20 years, and mistakes happen, unfortunately, every day. There's a lot of debate about the statistics on that, and frankly, that really bothers me because some of the academics say, well, it's not 400,000 that die, it's 200 or it's 100, and I'm like, it's still too many. And so I don't get caught up in that argument, although academics do. So you said a key thing. Your husband was there. And so, number one, don't assume you're safe. Have someone there with you, particularly in the hospital. In the book, I talk about my wife was in the hospital for 9 days. I never left her side other than leaving for a couple of times for different things to go back to our house. And I think that you need someone there. Mistakes happen. They give the wrong medication. You have to call what I say a timeout and literally put a T with your hand. Say timeout. Wait a minute. We're moving too fast. I really don't need that potassium. In fact, I have too much potassium, and you got to do that. So don't assume that the system is connected. Don't assume they've read every record on you. Don't assume safety. And that's where it starts.
Good advice. So people with chronic conditions like migraine often find themselves going from doctor to doctor and not getting relief. So in your book, you offer a handy acronym that can help us manage our doctor-patient relationships. It's called PLANS. I need acronyms. These things help me remember. So tell us what that means.
Sure. And I use the football analogy. Everybody has a game plan, and the idea of a game plan, as I talk about in the book, is you don't want to make the plan like the coach says on Sunday, right when the play is happening. You want to make the game plan either in the off season or the week before the game. And so we all want to be thinking about our game plan before we go to the doctor. And what is a good plan? It's patient-centered. That is, whatever you're going to do, you have to convey to your doctor what's important to you. And if it's not important to you and it isn't aligned with your goals, then why are you doing it? So the plan should be patient-centered. The next thing is learning, L. You need to learn about your condition, and your doctor can help you get that information or guide you. And your doctor needs to learn about you. And that is, you have to tell them all the information that's pertinent. And the learning is a big step. The next one is A, assignments. When you leave the doctor, everyone has assignments, not just you, though, the doctor and the nurse and other people. How many times have you left the doctor, gone to the pharmacy, and hasn't been called in? They didn't do their assignment. And so we all need assignments and be accountable. And then notify, N, is so critical, because if you leave a hospital or an ER or your doctor, if things are not going well, there needs to be an if this happens, then notify. And that N is so critical, because when we do not get notified, that's when bad things happen. So this is, how do you get a hold of the doctor or your healthcare team? And then finally, what's success? That's the S. You need to determine what success is for you. Is it being migraine free for a week or a month, or what being able to go to your child's soccer game, or is it just teaching a piano lesson or getting out of bed? And so what is this success? And like any good team, go back to that each time and see if you're hitting that success. And if you're not, you make a new game plan. So that's the PLANS, PLANS, that you really should approach your healthcare with.
So yeah, some great advice there. I think the having a plan is essential when you're dealing with a disease that has unanticipated attacks. And so you can have a plan before you go into a doctor's appointment, of course, but you can't really respond unless you've got a good game plan for those attacks when they arise, always at the most inconvenient time, I might add.
I am certain. Absolutely. That's just the way life is. And I think that you're right. There's many parts of the plan. There's prevention, which is critical, as you know. And then when you do have an attack, it's typically in a bad spot. You need to be ready. You need to be ready and have your interventions ahead of time. Have them with you. For example, my mother-in-law, we go skiing together, and she's getting up on the mountain without her inhaler, and she has asthma, and I just have to get on her case about that. So you have to have it with you. Mm-hmm. I hate to be that simple, but honestly, that's so important. And for an asthmatic, it could really be life-saving.
Right, right. So the emergency room is one of the most migraine unfriendly places. And if you're not prepared for that emergency room experience, it can go south, as we talked about, in sometimes life-threatening ways. But we're often treated like drug seekers and given the lowest priority of all patients. It's pretty frustrating for many people. But those who have had success are actually employing some of the things that you're talking about with the PLANS acronym. So we always ask our community, like, what do you do to survive the emergency room and get the most out of it? Because nobody wants to go there. And many of them are using protocols, taking in binders, like here is me, because you're not in any shape to accurately give that explanation to an emergency room doctor who is not trained typically in headache medicine.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, I mentioned the learning part of PLANS. The learning is the doctor has to learn about you. And if you can't convey that, and many times it's very detailed information, very specific, and patients are the expert of themselves, they need to educate the doctor on them. But sometimes they can't. So they need that data there on their phone or in a binder or whatever it is. And you brought up the big point of having someone there with you to help communicate that and kind of be another set of eyes, so to speak. So I think that's really important. And when you believe that you're being shuffled into the back and not prioritized and treated like a second-class citizen, like you're a drug seeker, quote unquote, that's the term sometimes is used, then you just need to call a timeout, like my sister did. I mean, she literally said to this orthopedist who was saying, well, you're never going to run again. You're never going to do this. And she said, wait a minute, aren't you interested in what's important to me? And so I would say do the timeout. And, sometimes that's just what the doctor needs. They're busy. They're running around. They're treating someone that's dying over here. They're walking in your room. Sometimes they need the timeout. So don't be afraid to do that. And, you can do it in a nice way.
Yeah, sometimes the hand signal timeout could be much more effective than trying to interrupt a doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're listening to Migraine Again, and our guest is healthcare expert and physician, Dr. Dennis Deruelle, and we'll have more to share about navigating the healthcare system in just a minute.
Lost your train of thought again? Lost an opportunity at work? Lost the chance to attend a special event? Navigating a life with migraine isn't easy. Frequent attacks can make it tough to think, to work, and even to show up. Find the help you need just one click away at migraineworldsummit.com. Each year, watch dozens of leading experts, including top patient advocates and headache specialists from the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, UCLA, and King's College London. Get an all-access pass to watch it anytime, anywhere, on demand at migraineworldsummit.com. Stop losing out and get back the life you deserve. You'll be glad you did. This is Migraine Again, encouraging and empowering you in your battle against migraine because you deserve to feel better. You can hear this conversation again or share it with someone who might like to hear it by going to migraineagain.com. And now, once again, here's Paula.
We're back with Dr. Dennis Deruelle, whose insights about the healthcare system can help us get better care without breaking the bank. So speaking of money, one estimate that I saw said that people with migraine spend 4 times as much on healthcare as their healthy counterparts. So what secrets or tips can you share to help people get more for their healthcare dollar?
Well, first of all, as I talk about in my book, most people are drafted onto their health insurance. So I call the insurers the owners because, they kind of pay the bills, and believe it or not, you have less choice in who your insurers than you think. For example, if you don't have a lot of means, you're going to be on Medicaid. If you are over 65, you're on Medicare. Now, there are some plans that you can choose within that. However, if you're in a big company, most companies are self-insured or they pick 1 or 2 plans. And so very few people literally go out in the exchanges of the markets and can shop around. So the first thing is at least try to pick the right plan for you and based on your situation. And most people, when they pick insurance, they spend more money on insurance than they need. That's most people. And so think about the right plan for you. And then secondly, many people with migraine have specialists or people that they have relationships with, particularly primary care these days. If you don't work through them and think about them first, you may get on a plan that excludes all of them, and then you're out of luck, as I talk about in the book. So think about your healthcare team first and then pick the right plan. I think if you do those two things, it'll help. And of course, I think spending time on prevention is another area to really focus. And if you can do that, I know it's hard to do, you can maybe also get fewer migraines.
Right. Prevention definitely does improve. And there are lifestyle modifications that you can make. And there are certainly some medical and alternative care things that you can do to help prevent migraines. But anything that we can focus on prevention-wise always reduces the number of attacks we're going to have. So great advice. Do you think there are any sort of simple changes that we can make to navigate the U.S. healthcare system better?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, there's a lot of apps out there today through the insurance companies. One is Castlight, for example. United Healthcare has their own. And basically, that website is a really good way to know how many prescriptions you've gotten, where you are with your deductible, who's in your network. There's just a plethora of information. If your insurer has a connection or a website like that, I think that's one good way to, in an encapsulated one snapshot, see where you are with your healthcare in terms of spending money and what's available to you. The second thing is a lot of people don't realize, but sometimes if you're paying cash and you're in your deductible, you can negotiate with people. It sounds crazy, but you can call ahead if you're having a procedure, for example, and say, I know my part of that is this. I'm going to pay cash. Do you give a discount for it? And they will many times. So I think thinking about shopping around, thinking about using cash when you're in your deductible, and then finally, don't always use your insurance, for example, for medications if you have a coupon or a discount, because sometimes it's cheaper just to pay for it. Now, it won't go towards your deductible, but it might save you a lot of money. And so those are some things that patients aren't aware of that can improve the value of their dollar.
Yeah, as we've developed these high deductible plans, we've become more like consumers and less like patients.
That's right. And people say patients can't be consumers because they can never be informed about a true price. But I disagree with that. If you look at the apps that are available today or websites, for example, for imaging, for getting an X-ray or getting an MRI, you can find out in your town where the MRIs are, how much they cost. And some of these radiology centers have flat fees for everything. It's $900 for an MRI, et cetera. So look, you can get information and you can shop around. You just have to take a couple steps.
Yeah, I was surprised how much MRIs vary, and people with migraine don't consume MRIs a lot, but we all need one now and then. That's definitely a good thing to shop. People oftentimes will split pills. And a pill splitter is like a $3, device that you can get, and it makes their medication go much further. So that's a really practical consideration on saving money.
There's a website though for drugs too. I hate to interrupt, but the same thing can apply to drugs. You can get the price of all the pharmacies in your area, and you can look at it. Now, again, sometimes it's relative to your insurance, but sometimes it's not if you're in your deductible, and so therefore, go ahead and look at the same kind of rx.coms and drugs.coms. Look at those sites. I have them in my book, and you can shop around with medications as well. However, if you use a different pharmacy or pharmacist because you get a better deal, it is so important to bring that information back to your healthcare team, your doctor, and your home pharmacist. So there is a trade-off sometimes by not using your pharmacist. When you can, it's best to go through them.
Great. Well, we will add links to those in the show notes for people if they need that, or they can pick up your book, even better yet,
Yes.
and have all of the resources there. So some good ideas. I had spoken with somebody who was who had a medical billing company, and he was telling me that patients might go and they'd get 80% of an expensive therapy covered, and then there'd be the 20% remainder. And he said oftentimes the 20% remainder, which is your responsibility, you can go to the manufacturer of those pharmaceutical drugs or devices and ask them if they have any coupons or ability to pay for that piece of it. And most people don't realize that. Is that true in your experience?
Yes. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, though, because some people say, well, those coupons are sometimes a one-time thing, and then they get you on the expensive medicine, and then you're really stuck with it. However, I completely agree that there are rebates and coupons available. There are even your doctor has samples. You don't want to kind of rely on that, but all of those are avenues that people should think about for that 20%. That is their part, definitely. So I agree with that.
So let's pivot for a minute and talk about the doctor-patient relationship and finding a great doctor. What are some practical considerations that we should be looking at when we're trying to find a great doctor for us and what we're struggling with at the time?
Well, I have a really extensive section in my book on this, and it's a very complete list of things to think about, but I wouldn't go through that here. I think the most important thing is that I consider the primary care doctor your head coach. And your head coach, you have to really have that, it's like, to me, the Tom Brady-Belichick relationship. You have got to have that relationship. That's not going to happen overnight. And so to me, the most important thing is get recommendations from people in healthcare. Everybody knows someone who knows a nurse. Everybody knows someone who knows someone in the healthcare field. Talk to your family members, talk to someone in healthcare, and get that first recommendation. Then go to the websites. It's okay to look at their reviews of these clinicians, although I wouldn't take them word for word. I would just look for red flags of anything that looks really out of line. Once you have those two things, I call the office, because the office is really the team around the doctor. And if they're not very nice and they're not handling things well, then you get the tone, of that office. So once you've done those steps, then I actually think you should talk to the practice manager just a little bit about how they operate ahead of time. And then you've got to set up. The only way to do it is go. And you really should be interviewing that doctor on your first visit. And you'll know pretty quickly if you line up in terms of style and the things that are important to you. So I really think, other than checking all their degrees and all of those things, and if they've had any bad problems, and I outline that in my book, I think those are the key things. And if you don't have a match, do not you need to move on and look for another one, because it's such an important relationship.
It is. And there are times when you have to ditch your doctor, and other times where you have to say, did I really do everything the doctor told me to do? Mm-hmm. Did I follow all of their directions? Was I a good patient? And take the responsibility yourself, saying, sometimes it's me. And sometimes I didn't do what my physical therapist told me to do, or I didn't do what the physician told me to do. And it's not fair to leave them until I have done that.
That's right. And, my mom, I talk about in the book, she's had the same primary care doctor, a wonderful doctor, for 25 years. And you can imagine the history and the knowledge. And so everything my mom does correctly goes through her head coach. She doesn't go out trying to go to see all these other people. It goes through him. And I think that now he may not have an appointment that day, as I talk about. You might need to go urgent care that day. You might need to go to the ER, unfortunately, as we've discussed. But if you try to go through your team first, and more often than not, you're going to have the right outcome. Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the owners, the insurance. Insurance reimbursement often dictates the kind of care that we're getting.
Right.
What do you recommend people do when the therapy that their doctor recommends gets denied by their insurance company?
Well, once again, the owner and the head coach have a pretty important relationship in a football team, and your head coach is your biggest advocate. So when I have had, and trust me, I've had over the years, I've had a patient that came in, unfortunately, in cardiac shock, and then, didn't make it. And then on Monday, I'm getting something from the insurance company saying they weren't sick enough to go to the hospital, and they, are denying it. I'm like, well, the patient died. And so, you can't make this stuff up. This happens every day, and it's unfortunate. So here is the answer. The first avenue is work with your doctor and say, listen, many times they can write a letter. Many times they can talk about things you've tried, et cetera, and really get the office to help you. That's why it's important to know the people in the office. And they can kind of go to the doctor and say, Mrs. So-and-so is having so much trouble with this. Can we do these things? And the doctor generally will do that. So the first thing is to work through your doctor. Now, when that stuff fails and it's not working, there is an appeals process that every insurance company has, and you can look at it, and I recommend going through it, because many times it's just the people that continue to push on that the insurance company does, and that does acquiesce to. So I would say those are the key points, and I have advocated for patients so many times over the years.
Well, they're fortunate to have a doctor that advocates for them, and a team in your office as well. So I think it's a great advice to go and meet that team and engage with the practice manager just to see if they're going to be able to help you with appeals as they come up, because there's some promising new therapies that are coming out for migraine, but they're going to be costly, and there may be some appeals that are required. So we can apply that probably this year and next year.
Definitely. And I have advised a lot of patients also that have MS, for example, in the same boat with a specialist with new therapies getting rejected and saying it's just you're going to have to pay cash, that whole story. So I couldn't agree more with that statement, and a lot more to come with treatments down the road. We pray.
We pray, yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Deruelle, for coaching us on how to perform the job of a professional patient with less physical and financial pain. His book is Your Healthcare Playbook, and you can get a copy of it through the link on migraineagain.com in the show notes under this program. And you can follow him on Twitter at Dr. Deruelle, at Dr. Deruelle. That's Deruelle. A little tricky, but you can get it. And if you're looking for an article to help you with this, we've got another one called 5 Tips to Deal with Insurance Hassles on Your Migraine Treatments that you can find on our website. We'll include a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, Dr. Deruelle, I have learned a thing or two that I can start applying this month. So thank you so much for being here.
It was a real pleasure, and thank you for your great show.
And when we come back, we're going to tackle the question of the day about finding a cure for migraine.
A thief is on the loose, breaking into 1 billion homes around the world like yours. This thief doesn't want your electronics or your jewelry. He wants your work days, your wallet, your relationships, and your most precious moments. On the street, he's known as Migraine. Ever heard of him? Lucky for you, your best defense is one click away at migraineworldsummit.com. Each year, watch dozens of leading experts, including top patient advocates and headache specialists from the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, UCLA, and King's College London. Get an all-access pass to watch it anytime, anywhere, on demand at migraineworldsummit.com. You'll be glad you did. Hey, we'd like to hear about your life with migraine and offer some help and encouragement if we can. If you've got a question about migraine, we'll do our best to answer it and might even include it on one of our upcoming podcasts. If you'd like to submit a question, just go to our website, migraineagain.com/question. And Paula, today's question comes from Terry in New Hampshire, who asks, when are we going to find a cure for migraine? I've been battling this condition for over 30 years, and it seems we should have made more progress by now. So, Paula, what is the exact date?
Let me get out my magic ball and see if I can answer that question. I can't answer that question, but what I can do is give you a little bit of insight into the frustration that we both share. Because I too have been battling migraine for, it seems like, forever. And it can be frustrating when you're on the outside as a patient and you just don't know, what are they doing? Isn't this a priority? And how could something so disabling not have a cure? And as I said, I wondered the same thing myself. And I want you to know that people are working on it tirelessly. They're a team of researchers and epidemiologists and advocates, and companies that are focused on this very problem, because we know it's a big, hairy problem. If you have 1 billion people with migraine, and the World Health Organization deems it to be the second most disabling disorder on the planet, and it's disabling people during the peak of their careers, this should be a priority, right? And there are a lot of people who would vehemently agree with that we need to make this a priority, because it is affecting our lives and our quality of life. But let me just pause to encourage you and kind of recap for you some of the progress that we've made in the past 3 decades or so, that I have been dealing with this, and it sounds like that you have been dealing with this as well. First of all, from a medical standpoint, we used to just have treatments like ergotamines were the best-in-class treatment. Now we have triptans, 7 different triptans and several different formulations, which allow people to be able to function and show up for those for whom they work. We have a lot of alternative therapies. We have supplements that we can use preventatively. We know a lot more about behavioral therapy. And there are some new therapies that are coming out, like neuromodulation has come on the scene in the past couple of years with devices. And within the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot more CGRP medications and ditans if they passed through the FDA screen. In the meantime, the process of being someone with migraine, we used to be all alone. It felt like I had a newsletter that I would get probably 30 years ago from the NHF. There are new nonprofits that have been formed, like the American Migraine Foundation, the Migraine Research Foundation, which are doing fantastic work. The Migraine Trust continues to do fantastic work. And there are online communities that we never had before, where you can find people who are just like us, who are struggling with it. And now a podcast, hey, so you can listen to this program. There's a lot more supporting us out there as we're all trying to struggle with it together. So if you want to know what's happening going forward and how you can be a part of it, let me give you a quick summation of that. What I have learned from my work in the field for the past few years is that they're working on several different fronts. One is, of course, finding a cure. We all want a cure. In the meantime, we're also looking on finding better treatments that can reduce the impact that it has on people's lives. Another is reducing the stigma. And the stigma is this sort of evil villain character that's in the background that affects how many resources we get to work on the cure and better treatments. So they're all kind of related in this plot. And then ultimately, we need more funding, because you don't find a cure for anything typically unless there is funding for really smart people to work on it and figure out an answer to that problem. A lot of the funding comes from government. A lot of it comes from industry, and some of it comes from private donors. Well, if we look at those for migraine, I can tell you that the government underspends on migraine relative to its burden on the population, and there's a whole team of people working on that. There is a fair amount of spending being done by industry because they recognize how much of a burden this is upon society, and they are working on a variety of new therapies to help solve that. And there's not really as much funding from individuals, major donors, and a collective body of people who are working to give money toward, finding a cure for migraine. So breaking each of those apart, we know that research takes years and years of development to take these experimental cures and try to find them and isolate them, and then pay researchers and doctors to vet them out and see if they're valid, and then to run them through the whole clinical trial process. That's a years and years of development cycle that goes on. It starts by getting really smart people to focus on this as a problem. the recruitment of doctors to the field, we frankly don't have enough doctors in the field because they face bias too. It's not as sexy or as rewarding financially or personally as being a heart surgeon, for example. It's a tough specialty to recruit for, and it's oftentimes people whose lives have been affected by migraine, either themselves or someone they're close to, who choose to go into it. And I am grateful every day for the people who are doctors and spending their life doing this. Second thing is the government funding behind this. And the U.S. government, the National Institute of Health, is probably numero uno on the funding list for major medical research. And they are not investing as much as we believe that they should, like, as I say, about as much as Arctic disease. And we have many programs talking about this, but I'll just let you know that several of us, including my husband and partner and Angie, our editor, and myself, and several of the other people we work with, are going to Headache on the Hill to really lobby Congress to try to get more funding for the National Institute of Health for migraine research. So that's a really important thing, and as well as other disabling headache disorders like cluster headache and new daily persistent headache. These are things that can ruin people's lives. And so we want more funding behind that. And then there's some private funding that's going on. Most notably in the past decade or so, the Goldbergs gave money to UCLA to do research there, a $10 million grant, the biggest grant ever. And Kathy Glazer and Stephen Semlitz formed the Migraine Research Foundation to create more research in this space. And they're giving out grants to different doctors and researchers around the world to try to help make progress against this. And the American Migraine Foundation and Migraine Trust and the National Headache Foundation all have various research projects that are going on using big data and other things to try to solve this and find some of the answers that we all desperately need. I serve on the American Migraine Foundation board, and I can tell you that they're working tirelessly to try to create a registry that will use the power of big data to answer this question. So, bottom line, I do not want you to lose faith. I do think that finding a cure is possible in our lifetime, and there are lots of people working on it. But if you want to learn more about how you can be a part of that, drop me a note and I'll tell you how you can get involved. Send it to Paula at migraineagain.com. And I'll give you some ideas on ways that you can get involved in the fight, because we need more people engaged every day. So thanks for asking. And before we go today, I have a personal favor to ask. If you'd like to hear more programs like this, could you just take 30 seconds to review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts? We would really appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Paula Dumas, wishing you a pain-free day.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us. We hope that you feel encouraged and empowered in your battle against migraine, because you deserve better. If you want to suffer less and live more despite migraine, be sure to check out all the great resources on migraineagain.com. Follow us on your favorite social network and subscribe to our free newsletter and this program. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell a friend about it, and be sure and join us again next time on Migraine Again. You'll be glad you did.